moved to New York City to take on a junior position with the legendary designer Massimo Vignelli. Today he's a partner in the New York office of the international design consultancy Pentagram. You may have heard about it before. Where he has worked for everyone from the Walt Disney Company and the Museum of Sex to the New York Jets and MIT Media Lab. His design goals are summed up by the title of his new book, due to be published next month. How to use graphic design to sell things, explain things, make things look better, make people laugh, make people cry, and every once in a while change the world. He is thrilled to be back in Cleveland, even if he is the oldest person in the room. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Michael Bierut.
I'm really happy to be here and proud to be here. Proud to be from Cleveland. Proud to follow great speakers like Jude and Will and Aaron and Michelle and Michael and Christina. All of them are really inspiring and hard acts to follow. I did not think I was an asshole, but I agree with 8 out of 10 of the criteria. It's pronounced Jif. What I was going to do is just say really quickly, what happened between being a kid and what I'm doing today, and then just show you a half dozen projects that I've learned lessons from that might have lessons for you, perhaps. So that's me. So this is me and my family. That's my mom and dad and my fraternal twin brothers, Ronald and Donald. Easter Sunday, 1969. Like Christina, I sort of knew really early on that I wanted to be a graphic designer, and like her, I had a very straight career path. I was good at art when I was a kid, and my mom signed me up when I was like in kindergarten, first grade, to take Saturday morning art classes at the museum, at the art museum, driving all the way from Garfield Heights University Circle and Fort Falcon, which is a harrowing experience for her, I think, a young married woman with a rambunctious kid in the passenger side. And you have to think that this is ancient history. There's no internet, there's no email, there's nothing. And so my mom would drive me to the art museum, and I would take classes. Does anyone know this painting? This is my version, age 7, of the burning of the houses of Lords and Commons by J.W.T. Turner, which hangs today in the museum. I signed it myself with that title, by Michael Bierut, actually. Just taking full appropriate possession of it. I learned, like many of you did, that your art talent could be used to manipulate people's opinion of you. You can see that, again, early to the party, in my opinion, unlike Jude, I anticipated this whole Titanic thing that James Cameron eventually exploited at great financial compensation early on, as early as 1969, by writing this pretty epic paper for my social studies class in Ms. McDonald. And I got that A+, not only because of my handwriting or the comprehensiveness of my analysis of the event, but illustrations that I did like this, using a big ballpoint pen, and you can see really enthusiastic about drawing clouds and icebergs, kind of confused about drawing people, and think I was grounding and waving, and that continued to this day. The difference is the first thing, a picture that goes in a museum, and the second thing, something that accompanies words and is meant to get an effect out of a reader. I didn't get the difference, but I knew that I really liked doing that second thing. And it was almost, I would say, 50 years ago, here in Cleveland, I was on the passenger side of that same car with my dad at the wheel, and we were probably on Granger Road somewhere, going between Garfield Heights and Maple Heights on my way to get a haircut. And my dad was at a red light, and he pointed over to a construction vehicle that was parked off the side of the road. And he said, "Look at that, isn't that neat?" And I said, what? He says, well, the logo is clever. I'm not sure if he called it a logo. People didn't talk about logos in those days. He says, the way they wrote their name is clever. And I said, what do you mean? And on the side of this truck, it said Clark. And it was a forklift truck. And he said, well, look, the way the L goes under the A is just like what the truck does. And I was like, oh my God. Like, is this happening everywhere? How long has it been going on? And like, even now, I get chills when I look at that. I really do. Because I remember thinking, painting pictures of buildings on fire is cool. Drawing the Titanic is cool. But to do something like this, to slip this secret thing into something that's just out there in the world, like, how do you get to do that? And so, a few years later, I was a freshman in high school, and I found this book in my high school library at Normandy in Parma. And shout out Parma, shout out Normandy. And you see it's part of the Aim High vocational series, and this one is called Aim High for a Job in Graphic Design / Art by Esnio Fujita. I didn't know who Esnio Fujita was, but he actually designed the Godfather logo, among other things. Great, great designer. He did this book, and I opened it up, and it was just sort of like a vision of the future. Everything in this book were people doing exactly that thing that thrilled me about that forklift truck logo. And suddenly, Neil Fujita put a name to the thing I wanted to do. It wasn't a thing that was related to / art. It was this other thing, graphic design. So I was like electrified by this. I took the book out. By the way, thank God that book was there, because the other books in the series included in the dry cleaning industry, barber, other things. So God bless them for including graphic design. Thank you, Aim High Vocational Series editors. I sort of was wicked by this book, and I thought I have to find out everything I can about this. Now, how would you do that today? You just open up a computer and go to Google and search graphic design. I went to the Parma Regional Library on Snow Road, went to the physical card catalog, which I'm sure is no longer there. Those are all gone now. And looked up GRA, and sure enough, there was a book called Graphic Design Manual. And it was this book. I don't know if any of you guys know this book. This is like the most esoteric book on graphic design ever published. It is basically Armin Hoffman, a Swiss design professor's coursework for the basic foundation studies at the Kunstgewerbeschule in Basel, Switzerland, where they taught graphic design. Why this book was in the Parma Library, why it still is in the Parma Library, I have no idea. But then this book became gospel truth to me. And I'm still like 14, 15 years old, and I'd never met a living graphic designer. It was all just kind of like this name, Neil Fujita, this new name, Armin Hoffman. And so I said to my mom, I want this book for Christmas. And my poor mom, again, there's no Amazon. So she calls up like Higbee's and Halley's and May Company. In those days, they all had book departments. There wasn't even Barnes & Noble back then. And one of them said, oh yeah, we just got that book in, graphic design, we got it in for Christmas. Perfect. My mom's really excited. Bingo. The most expensive book she ever bought. Big coffee table book. Hard to find, she got it. She gave me the package. Even before I opened it, I could tell it was the wrong size. But I sort of smiled with a happy face on it. She gave me that book, Graphic Design by Milton Glaser. So here I am at 416 Sarasota Drive in Parma, Ohio, a student at Normandy High School, not knowing anything about this field except for these 3 books, and never having met or seen a real graphic designer in my life. So that was how I sort of started my career, and it has burned in me ever since. I stand here, 5 decades later, still feeling just as passionate about these 3 books, about those 2 words, and about what I do, and what so many of you guys do in the audience. So to have a chance to talk about in front of you is really thrilling. The rest of it went pretty fast, as I recall. I started doing stuff that was not like, beautiful pen and ink drawings of sinking ships, icebergs, or people drowning. But, what I really would love is the drama department said, hey, we're putting on a show. It's called Wait Until Dark. It's about a blind woman being tormented by some thugs. And I didn't even know this show, by the way. Wait Until Dark is so cool. There's a really great twist at the end. It makes people scream. And if they scream, that normally can happen. I'll tell you privately where it's on spoil for anyone. But so, I didn't know where it came from. So this is done with like a felt tip pen and probably a piece of cardboard that came with the laundry or something. Gave it to the silkscreen department in Normandy High School. They printed up 50 of them, hung them all over the school. I arrived Monday morning and suddenly, like, I'm famous. Like my poster is everywhere. More people would see the poster than would see the show. I was like, this is just the best. This is art, like the way it really should be, not parked at the museum over in Newbury Circle. It's like a long drive over there. Instead, it's like right in your face. And the show's over, they tear it down, throw it in the garbage can. But still, right? So I went to college. That was me looking like, I'm told, a BG. The late 70s, studying at the University of Cincinnati. University of Cincinnati, shout out to UC, BAA then, not BAP. I did stuff like this. It was, the program there was taught by a lot of people. At least a few of them had actually studied with Armin Hoffman from Basel, Switzerland, but it was very, very stringent Helvetica on grid. And so all that little laser and all my felt tip pen habits kind of got ground out of me in a boot camp. But it was actually good for me. 5 years of study, some great, amazing internships. And at the very end of it, I had the best luck you could ever have. I got a great first job in New York. Even if I wanted to stay in Cleveland, it's so different now. But in those days, there was like so few places to work. New York seemed like easier pickings, and I had a really good job offer with this fellow, Massimo Vignelli. So my first job was being the lowest paid, lowest rated peon assistant production designer working for a very, very, very famous New York designer, Massimo Vignelli, who with his wife Layla, shown there on the right, had designed everything from the New York subway signage to the logo for Bloomingdale's department store, and it was just a thrill being with them, and I was so ill-prepared. They were so worldly and sophisticated. They would talk about, Bloomingdale's, and they'd say they were trying to evoke the Galleria in Milano, and I just would sort of think, well, that's sort of like the Parmatown Mall, I guess. Mostly, I kept my mouth shut and my head down, and I just was a sponge. And Massimo was obviously a mentor to me, and you know what? I never asked him if he would be my mentor. And I think that's how you should do it, guys. Don't ask. It's not up to them. You just kind of hijack them and make them your mentor. You don't have to tell them that they're your mentor, okay? You just do it. It's on you to do it, not them, okay? And so these two were like my adopted parents when I moved to New York. I intended to work there only for 18 months maybe, because Massimo had such a strong style. I didn't want to get brainwashed by it. But instead, it was such a great job, I stayed there 10 years. I've only had 2 jobs. From 1980 1990, I worked for Massimo and Layla. Then in 1990, I was a little bit restless, but I was used to working with a lot of people around me. And I had a conversation with a designer, another hero of mine named Woody Pirtle, who was a partner of a firm called Pentagram. Now, Pentagram has a really interesting setup. It's a confederation of designers, each one of whom has a business that's not unlike, the businesses that you've heard described today. Jews or Aaron's or Christina's or Michael's or Will's. But each designer, each partner of Pentagram runs a small independent business in the structure of a larger confederation that lets them take on bigger jobs, share resources, share common overhead, and share a portfolio that helps seem to qualify you for work that you might not really be qualified to do. So I left Woody. I was talking to Woody, and he said, maybe your next step could be joining Pentagram. And I sort of thought, as your assistant. And he said, no, we're looking for a new partner, and we're ready to take a gamble. And they did. And so in October 1990, about 25 years ago, I became the youngest partner of Pentagram. I am, I don't know if you can see me. I'm in the back with the beard in this thing here. Anyone heard of Peter Saville, the famous record sleeve designer? He's in the driver's seat there. So he and I joined at the same time. He stayed about 2 years, and I stayed 25 years. I'm still there today. I was the youngest partner in that picture. I'm the oldest partner 25 years later in this picture. So, by the way, no matter how you work at it, that problem will follow you. Every day you get a little bit older, and the other people, just those younger people, just keep coming and coming. So, all you young, inexperienced people, your whole lives ahead of you, God bless you. I remember that too. So I'm now a part of this firm, and the work that I'll show you now is stuff that I've all done, mostly done at Pentagram. And like I said, it's I still go to work every day intending to do design work. Pentagram's a big firm. I got 20 partners, 5 offices, there are 8 partners in our New York office, and about 100 people, about 10 of whom work for me, and the other ones work for one of my 7 partners. But each of us come in hoping to do design work. And so some of the design work I've done will come next. And the name of my book, as Aaron said, is How To. It's one of the things that really fascinates me when I'm talking to other designers when it comes to presentations and conferences like this one, is just kind of, you sort of see the end product, but like, what was the thinking that got you there? What was the key thing that made it happen? So I don't have necessarily a lot of process things to show you, but I do have some background on some of these things, including some hard lessons that I've learned, and I'll just take you through what I promise I have a dozen of them, and then we can chat. So the first one isn't really my work, but it just goes to show you, if you're a graphic designer here, people say graphic design is trivial, and usually it's trivial. Every once in a while, it's really important. So this lady here is the most influential graphic designer of the 21st century. Her name is Teresa Laporte. She's not a trained graphic designer. She is actually, she worked in 2000 for the Palm Beach County, Florida Board of Elections. And she had one job, to lay out a ballot, basically. And she had the same problem that all of you graphic designers in the audience have had. The client, the people organizing the election, just gave her too much stuff to fit on the page. And so she came up with this clever solution. The solution was to not put it all on one side of the page, but to put it on both sides of the page. And the way the ballot worked was you punched out holes in the middle. So this is 15 years ago now. So but what she did was, that was the election where George W. Bush was running against Al Gore. And George W. Bush was choice number 1, Al Gore was choice number 2. And Teresa decided to have the choices alternate, left to right, left to right, left to right. So if you were in Palm Beach County, you went to vote, and if you wanted, say, Al Gore, you would say, I don't want George Bush, I want Al Gore, and you punched out, say, the second hole down, because he was the second guy down. But you were actually voting for the guy on the right, Pat Buchanan, some guy that maybe you didn't want to vote for. So estimates vary, but there seems to be between 800 and 1,400 people think that they voted accidentally for Pat Buchanan instead of Al Gore. If any of you guys recall from your early childhoods, in 2000, there was a long recount because it all came down to Florida. It all came down to just a few counties in Florida. It all came down to, in fact, Palm Beach County in Florida. And Bush ended up winning just because, some people say, because of the way this ballot was laid out. So it's a one-color job. It's government work. It's just putting a bunch of type on a page. It's so unglamorous. It's not fun. But, and Teresa, God bless her, she did her best, and she's actually kind of creative. Because of that, perhaps, we had a different president than people really wanted to vote for, and then a lot of other stuff happened in, 2001 and 2002, that, maybe, I'm not saying it's all because of graphic design, design counts, you do it carefully. Lesson number 2. The most important, I learned this from Massimo, the most important thing about doing good design is having good clients. You sort of think, through sheer force of will and talent and imagination, you will overcome every obstacle. Yeah, good, but still, if you have horrible clients, it's really, really hard. So I applaud the idea of working for friends. I applaud the idea of working for a little bit less for someone you really like or someone you're really interested in. As Massimo used to say, good, if you do bad work, at least some more bad work. If you do good work, at least some more good work. It sounds like obvious, but it's amazing how many people think, I'll do this bad thing for the money, I'll do this bad thing because they'll let me do something better next time. It just doesn't work. Find people who you like who will let you do good work. This guy, Jeff Braverman, had this company called Nuts Online, and he sold nuts over the internet. And he was in there early with the internet. And that's why his company's called Nuts Online, because, who would buy nuts online? So he had this one ambition, which was to change it, and the name of the website that he had was nutsonline.com. And so he had this big ambition to acquire nuts.com as his URL. And I sort of blocked out who had nuts.com, but it was like one use of the word nuts that kind of was not safe for work, as I recall. But Jeff finally acquired it and then came to us and said, I don't have much money. We don't sell in stores. We just want to come up with some fun packaging for the new product using the name. So we looked at a lot of different things. And the thing that's funny is it's like a family company. Jeff and his uncles and his great uncles and his brothers and sisters all run it together in Newark, New Jersey. And so, and they sort of have a silly sense of humor, and it's just, peanuts and snacks and stuff. So what we did was we took it to another thing where we sort of like had a handwritten logo that I did, extrapolated the typeface that from, again, my handwriting, and we sort of built a graphic program around this just to show that I sort of think, I think anyone can do this kind of lettering. The hard thing was drawing the little characters with the nuts that represented the family members. So I tried, but I failed. And eventually, that's Jeff, by the way, there's a former Pentagram intern, a brilliant illustrator today called Christoph Niemann, who agreed to draw these nuts for me as a favor, and so he did all of them. So if you order from nuts.com, they come in these fun packages. Because they're not sold in stores, they don't have to have all these features to draw your eye on the shelf. It's just sort of like supposed to be a nice little surprise that you get when you open the package when it comes to your door. And so, there's all kinds of silly things written on them. They kind of go together. Then the shipping cartons have writing on all on 5 sides and a little bit on the bottom too. And just sort of makes this graphic program based sort of on complete analog communication, just to show that it's a personal thing. And this is all because this isn't some giant corporation. All this stuff looks the way it does because Jeff and his family are just kind of like regular people. And I showed them stuff, and they said, we like this, we don't like that. Can you make my cartoon version look more handsome, or whatever? And so we just kind of accommodated them. So, and the stuff is actually pretty good. Why go to the store to buy like peanuts and snacks when you can just order them in bulk by the ton from nuts.com? Okay, so this was one of the hardest jobs I've ever done in my life, and it's sort of hard because of the weight of tradition bearing on it. I think every project I'm going to show you has a wonderful client behind it. So a guy who I've known for years. And by the way, if you find wonderful clients, really stay in touch with them. Like never hold on to them so tight and never let them go. So this guy, Terry Schaefer, I met him probably in the 80s when I was just a nobody at Vignelli Associates, and he was an up-and-coming guy at some company back then. He switched jobs, he switched another job, he was like up and coming in retail, and eventually he got appointed head creative director of Saks Fifth Avenue, the department store. And he asked me whether or not I could redo the logo and the packaging for Saks Fifth Avenue. So I had never done anything like this before. And the only reason I got that call was that me and Terry had known each other a long time, and we liked working together. So again, if you're starting out, the best marketing, like that orthodontist, whatever she wants you to do, just keep saying yes, okay? I swear to God, it really does work that way. And so Taryn had this logo that Saks had, and this is like the typeface, sort of like Pinot, and he said, I like it as a square, but the trouble is, on their bags, they printed it gray in silver on a color they call pewter, which actually means gray on gray, meaning if it was sort of cloudy, it just looked like a gray bag that no one could read with any type on it. And they wanted something that was much more bold that would stand out. However, this isn't like a new store. It's not an up-and-coming kind of place. It's been around for a long time. Yet, fashion is this thing that needs to change all the time and seem new and exciting. And so what we decided, we tried all this stuff, and for weeks after weeks, we kept like setting the word Saks Fifth Avenue in different typefaces. And whatever, it just kind of looked like we were just kind of like taking the whole history, putting it in a dump truck and dumping it in a landfill, and saying, we're going to pretend that never happened, pretend that we're brand new. Instead, one day, Karen said, we got this like logo from the 70s that's still around, the one on the bottom there. And you can see it's based on a logo from 1955, and you see they had similar cursive logos before that. He said, some people like that. Why don't you see, maybe we could do something with it. And so, and this is lesson, I'm not counting my lessons, but another lesson is be really alert to accidents that happen, because this sort of seemed like a failure to me. Okay, we couldn't come up with a new logo, so we're just going to dust off the old logo. And it seemed sort of like sad, but I said, okay, I've run out of other ideas, so let's at least do this just in case. I brought it back. one of my designers, Carrie Powell, quickly scanned this lumpy thing here and put it on her computer and started toning it up. So it eventually started looking like that, liposuction and crunches. And then she was blowing up parts of it really big. And to fine-tune the curves and things. And I was way across the studio. We work in an open studio, no nice offices. Proximity, again, that idea that I think Will and Aaron had. And I saw her screen, and she had blown up this part of the logo, and I sort of thought, at first I thought, what is that? That looks cool. Then I realized it was that good old Saks Fifth Avenue logo. So we took it and divided it into 64 squares. And each of those squares has like this beautiful little abstract painting in it that is sort of new, is sort of startling, is fresh, is the future, yet all of them kind of by their very nature contain the DNA of Saks somehow. And then those things became the building blocks of all the packaging we did. So, those were their shopping bags, boxes. And there's always like a clue. The full logo was always on the side or underneath the lid or something. We sort of had a small repeat pattern of it mixed up to like a houndstooth pattern, and gift cards and all this other stuff. And then finally the awning over the store itself. And so this is, your mistakes really help if you kind of like save all of them. Don't throw out any mistakes. One of them probably is the answer, in fact. And this thing ended up being the answer. And I must say, another thing is great. It's so great to sell someone back something they already own. I presented this new program in front of like a town hall of all their employees, probably about as many people in an auditorium this size. And I said, and they were all afraid of how much they would hate the new logo. Then I said, it's not a new logo, it's your old logo, which you love, which I love even more, and look what we did. And people were like weeping. This is how you get people for higher design. You found the logo, you found this old logo, and you cleaned it up, and you sort of said, here, now it's just a nice thing. And then my daughter, I have 3 kids, all of whom are kind of bored with me as kids get. And my youngest daughter always says that all I do is take what they have already, tweak it a little, and sell it back to them. So, if it works, sometimes it's the solution. So, there you have it. So sometimes you get a big problem, and there's another lesson for you, where everything you need to know to solve the problem is already stated right there in the problem. If you're taking the SATs or something, someone says they give you a book with all the answers in it, right? You don't have to think of the answers. They give you a printed book that has all the answers to those multiple choice questions. All they do is they disguise the answer with a bunch of things that aren't the answer. And so it's always, pick one, A, B, C, D, E, all the above or none of the above. And sometimes, but it's always there. And I think that's so true with design too. The answer is always there on what you get. So this was a project for the New York Times. They were moving into a big building on 8th Avenue. I had worked for the New York Times for years, and I had done jobs that are the most fun jobs you can do. And I'm sure every person in this room has done jobs like this, if not for the New York Times, then for someone else. You would get a call on, I would get a call on Tuesday morning, and they would say, we need an illustration for an editorial that's going to run Thursday morning. And it's this diplomat named George Kennan has written an editorial saying that NATO should not expand to include new countries. So I got that phone call, went to a meeting with another client, started doodling, realized that you expanded NATO literally, it formed N-O, and sort of did itself. And I just faxed it back to him, and then the day after that, it ran a newspaper, and that afternoon, everyone threw out the newspaper. And I was $250 richer for having contributed to the national history about international diplomacy. And so I did a lot of these things, and if you're working on long, slow, tedious, detail-oriented projects, to be able to get to do something fun and fast is just an irresistible thing. So I've done illustrations like this for about the cult of anonymity, about stealing nuclear secrets, about former leftists becoming enthusiastic about military intervention, about this is quite old and it just seems to never go out of style, about people who are militaristic and they're leaning, sort of being able to having trouble distinguishing between these countries, and why not just kind of let the odometer keep rolling as you go from one to the next. About The Supreme Court, which tends to get tied 5-4 on so many decisions. Thank you, Supreme Court architect, for having 8 columns in the actual Supreme Court building. The end of The Sopranos, remember, just spoiler alert, just went right to black. And so, look, there's no again. If you look for no, you find a lot. Yes, it's hard to find. No, so easy. So the New York Times called me up, not with one more job, except it wasn't to do a little $250 illustration. It was to do the signs on their new building. Their original building in New York actually gave Times Square its name. There it is. They moved partway through their history to a dumpy, in my opinion, masonry building on West 43rd Street, where it looked like a factory. It literally was the factory in which they printed the newspapers in the basement. Trucks on the first ground floor would then leave and deliver the newspaper to New York and the world, and the reporters all worked on the upper floors. It was a grimy, dark stone building. They were moving to a beautiful new glass building designed by the architect Renzo Piano, completely transparent, glass rooms inside, glass walls on all sides, nothing but a series of horizontal rods to kind of shade the sun and to retain the heat on the outside. So a beautiful minimalist building they were moving into, which the transparency was a metaphor for journalism. The only catch was they were just moving around the block, and where they were moving was still within the Times Square district. Times Square has a requirement. You know what Times Square looks like, right? It looks this way now because any new building is required to have big signs on it, just so Times Square stays like Times Square. There's a fear when corporations started moving in that they would put up a lot of quiet, tasteful buildings, and then visitors to Times Square and people who live in New York would be deprived of this sense of this entertainment capital of the world, or at least the biggest entertainment capital east of Playoff Square, I'm told. And so every building has a ginormous sign on it, and the sign has to be stuck on the building. So they came to us and they said, look, we have to figure out a way to put a big sign on a glass building without blocking anybody's view. And so we came back and we proposed a giant New York Times logo in this beautiful fracture type that the designer Matthew Carter had just tuned up for them. But instead of just attaching the building, we broke it into 843 little pieces. Each piece is a little kind of like teardrop-shaped piece attached to one of those rods on the outside of the building. And then, when they're all put together, they sort of form the letters. And then when you look at it from below, because those teardrops are pointing out straight horizontally, they all sort of join up and it looks like a solid sign, right? And then you look at it from the inside, you can see through it, and your view is unimpeded. These people look at the east facade of the Port Authority bus terminal. As you see through the window there, this is, I'm told, the obituary department. So I'm not sure if they appreciate that view or they'd rather look at the back of some letters, right? So this is one of those things, just so you know despite that everyone has maps on their handheld devices, supposedly, it's amazing how people will stand in front of these things and just talk about where they want to go next. And every time I see someone doing that, I get excited and I think, hey, thank you for using that map that we slaved over. And if I told them that, they'd have no idea what I was talking about. Because it all looks like you just press a button and a map comes out, right? Okay. I just have a couple more things to show. This is a really daunting project, and this is one I said no to a couple of times. It was for MIT Media Lab. MIT has this fantastic design history, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Interestingly enough, two brilliant women designers worked there in the 60s and 70s and in the 80s, Jackie Casey and Muriel Cooper. Jackie Casey gets as much credit, if yes, we should get as much credit as people like Massimo Vignelli for introducing modernism to North America. Brilliant designer, did all these lecture posters for MIT back in the day. Muriel Cooper designed one of my favorite logos of all time, the logo for the publisher MIT Media Lab. You see there's an M, then an I, then a T, then a P. Can you imagine when this was first introduced, people would say, I don't get it, that's stupid, who designed this, my 5-year-old, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now I got a call and they said, we want a logo for the Media Lab that's as good as this thing that Muriel Cooper did back in 1963. Okay, so that was the challenge. And we decided what we were going to do as an acronym somehow. We looked at all these different things and thought it somehow should be ML for Media Lab. And how do we do it? So here's the interesting thing. Some of you guys might know they had this amazing thing they did for their anniversary, this algorithm-based thing that had 60,000 different permutations. And they had been using that, but they thought, we just want one, like that thing that Muriel Cooper did for MIT Press. And so we said, okay, using that as a starting point, we could isolate the grid underneath it, and then write a letter M on it like that, letter L on it like that, and that made MIT Media Lab. And so that was okay, but what makes the Media Lab interesting is the fact that it's actually not one lab, it's actually 24 labs. If you work there, you are your own boss, sort of, and you run your own little unit, and you get to name your own little unit, and you get to explore what you want as part of that unit. So it's made up of all these different smaller groups that are studying all these different things about robotics, and about psychology, and about perception, and about how we move in cities, and about how 3D printing can make minute things, and all this other stuff that's really amazing. And so I actually said, this is fine, but it doesn't really look exciting, and really what it doesn't show is all this different stuff they do. And I just said to one of my designers, Aaron Fay, maybe we could, that's an M and an L, could we take the acronyms of the other groups and make logos using the same system? Then I said, I gotta go, I got left. And then I came the next morning, and Aaron said, I got something for you, and it was this. It's all the same grid, all the same system. Go, baby, go. Always the same acronyms, and they each kind of all go together to kind of make this relational system, And I thought, this is complicated, but these guys are all geniuses, right? So maybe for once, I love simplicity, but maybe this is some time where complexity could actually carry the day. So we went and showed it to them, and they dug it, and we had to introduce it to a bunch of PhDs. All of them worked for one of these groups, so we made a little film with a little bit of music behind it that goes like this. It looks like 6. He was saying, well, that looks like low-bit video games, and I just sort of said exactly, like, the last thing I want to do is try to out-innovate these people, so I'm just going to go back to the, it is back to basics in a way, it's just a different kind of basics. So an alphabet and icon system, signage, all kind of like paying off this system. You sort of see that logo can kind of turn sideways and turn into an arrow. It opens up, you put things inside it. Then they had an event there called Deploy, where they launched it. You sort of see that they have signs guiding you around. It sort of becomes a pretty pattern, business cards. And they niche on a book. And then two groups overlap. Sometimes they correspond, so they each get a pick a color, and they kind of just slot together like that. It's kind of cool. There's that Deploy event where you do a bunch of stuff using the same grid. Posters for that. Tote bag, black painted wall, black and white striped shirt. I do that. Little buttons. Not toilet paper, this is packing tape. This looks, and then finally I made, well, this looks like Jude. Sure, eventually I came late to that, I'm sorry. And so, you can see there's certain things I still like, black and white, helvetica, stuff like that. So the last thing I'll show you is, I'd say the opposite. And it's the thing that we all want to do secretly is somehow change the world and save the world using graphic design. And I showed you how to ruin the world, so every once in a while you can have an effect in the world in a positive way, I think, even if you don't understand what you're doing, and I did not in this case. I got approached by a philanthropy called the Robin Hood Foundation. They asked me if I would be the graphic designer for this program that they had to design new libraries for all these underserved public schools in the New York area, in Brooklyn and Queens, in South Bronx, and Harlem, places like that. And they brought in all these different architects to work on the architecture, and they just wanted me to kind of coordinate whatever graphics they needed. And that started with this logo, and I thought I had all these cool ideas for a logo. So, I thought this is like our new libraries for new schools. Like, let's just blow everyone's mind and come up with, like, not just a new logo, but rename these libraries, because libraries are foreign. So you call them Reading Room, or you call it, I even say you call it OWL, like One World Library. OWL. I'm going to OWL. Let's meet at the OWL. I picture kids saying that. Or the Red Zone, that was my best idea, actually. And they said, well, what does that mean? And I said, well, it's like red, like I read that book. And like it's it's like kind of like a joke. And they said, well, librarians, have a sense of humor, but they tend not to think that spelling words wrong. And so, so they said, stop trying to come up with a new name for this library. These kids don't even know what a library is. This is what their libraries look like now. They're just like these rooms that no one has cared about for years. Just books shoved on shelves, completely disheveled and sad, and this was a chance to make branding things for them. So I said, okay. They said, please, we just want to know here I am. They kept saying, is this going to work? And I actually am honest enough that I said, I think so. I think it'll really look like the logo, but I'm not positive. And I was on a bus going up 8th Avenue, and I remembered that was the day they were installing it. And I heard they were going to install it one of those days. And I switched to the right-hand side of the bus, and oh my God, it was like going up there, like the first 5 letters of it up there. And I literally jumped up, clapped my hands, and hit my head on and they actually paused the bus to make sure that I wasn't having a seizure. I just saw something exciting outside. I was like, what? Just a sign, so no one cares. Okay, then there's a fairly simple thing they asked for. Can we do all the room and door signs on the inside? So basically, some of these rooms are just people's offices. They're writers like Frank Rich or Maureen Dowd. But there are all these rooms that just have functions, not people. And we decided to kind of restore the old-fashioned ethos of the New York Times when it was a factory they printed in the basement by making each one of those new signs have a different image on it. So no two of these signs are alike. Every men's room sign has a picture of boys on it doing something. Every women's room sign has a picture of girls doing something. And they're all printed on metal, so they look like those plates you print the newspaper on. They're all printed with an exaggerated dot pattern, which is the way the Times and every other newspaper used to look. And so finding these pictures in their archive was really, really fun. Nearly 1,000 of them. And it sort of means that even if you're going to a broom closet there, or an equipment room, you have a moment of like surprise and connection. You know, this is your home, this is really where you work. It may all be glass and steel, but you actually have a proud history there. And I think that's what a lot of us we have to do as designers, is figure out how to connect up people with their culture. I think everything about the modern world conspires to separate people from their own histories, from their own backgrounds, from their own experiences, their own culture. And I think we as graphic designers particularly have the tools to actually let people reconnect.